Let me ask you something, not as a friend, but as someone who respects your time. When you walk into a room, what do people see? Do they see strength, presence, someone worth noticing? Or do they see nothing at all? This is a question I wish someone had asked me years ago, before I learned the hard way that the world doesn't operate on truth. It runs on illusion, on perception. You can be kind, intelligent, even brilliant. But if the way you show up doesn't demand respect, you'll be ignored. See, we've all been told, be yourself and the world will respond. But that's a lie, sweet, noble, and deeply misleading. The world doesn't respond to who you are. It responds to what you project. Talent? Useless without presence, wisdom, wasted if your voice doesn't carry, goodness? Invisible if you carry yourself like someone asking for permission to exist. We're taught that effort leads to recognition. But in reality, the man who gets seen is the man who assumes he should be seen, not the one who waits to be chosen, but the one who enters a room like he already belongs there. Even if the crown is still invisible, he walks like a king, and here's the most painful part. Even if he hasn't earned that confidence, he gets it, because perception doesn't reward virtue. It rewards performance. It rewards the illusion of strength, certainty, and value. You've seen it, haven't you? The average guy with nothing to offer, but the way he moves, the way he talks, it commands attention. And meanwhile, the quiet genius waits, hoping the world will notice. It won't, not unless he learns the game. This isn't about being fake. It's about being intentional. You don't need to lie, but you do need to embody the value you hold inside. So I'll ask you again, when you enter a room, what do people see? And more importantly, what are you showing them? Let me tell you a secret about human nature. People don't care who you really are. They care about what you make them believe. We like to think we live in a rational world, where truth rises, where merit shines. But in reality, we live in a world ruled by perception. People don't investigate your past. They don't scan for your credentials. They look, they sense, and they decide within seconds who you are. And here's where it gets interesting. The more power you project, the more power people assume you have. Even if it's just surface, even if it's just performance. Because in the animal part of our brain, we're still wired to follow the strongest signal. The one who stands taller, speaks slower, moves like he's in control, that's the one we trust. That's the one we obey. It's not fair, but it's real. And if you're someone who's been quietly waiting to be recognized, this truth probably hurts. Because maybe you do have the skills, the knowledge, the depth, but if you don't carry yourself like someone who matters, the world won't hand you a crown. It never has. Just look at history. Julius Caesar didn't just conquer Gaul, he looked like a man born to rule Rome. Napoleon wasn't tall, but he walked like a giant. Machiavelli, he had no royal blood. Yet kings listened when he spoke because he wrote with the tone of a ruler. What did they all understand? They didn't wait for approval. They didn't ask permission. They assumed the role. And the world followed. Now, I know what you might be thinking. But isn't that fake? Isn't that just pretending? Yes, at first. But every transformation starts with a choice. And sometimes the act comes before the truth. You fake it just long enough for it to become real, not for others. For yourself, that's the rule no one teaches you. Appear powerful long enough, and you will become powerful. So let me ask you, what would happen if you stopped waiting to feel ready and started acting like the person you were meant to be? That shift might be the beginning of everything. Let's talk about something that's been misunderstood for far too long. Confidence. Most people think it's a personality trait, something you either have or you don't. But that's not true. Confidence is a weapon. And in a world that feeds on dominance and impression, it might just be the sharpest one you've got. You've probably seen this before. The guy who walks into a room with nothing particularly impressive to offer. No experience, no depth, not even much intelligence. And yet somehow people listen to him, they agree with him, they follow him. Meanwhile, the quiet expert sits in the back, waiting for the moment he'll finally be acknowledged. That moment rarely comes. Why? because people don't follow competence. They follow certainty. We are social creatures wired for survival, and certainty feels safe. When someone carries themselves like they know what they're doing, like their voice is law, we instinctively lean in, even if they're wrong. Even if what they're saying doesn't hold up under a microscope, confidence overrides logic. That's what makes it dangerous. And that's what makes it powerful. There's something fascinating here. Once people believe you're strong, they'll actually defend that belief for their own peace of mind. They'll justify your mistakes, they'll excuse your flaws, because challenging that illusion would mean admitting they were wrong to trust you. And that's not something the human ego handles easily. That's why confidence becomes a form of social hypnosis. It doesn't just influence others, it rewires how they see the world. It makes the false look true and the weak look powerful. Now, I'm not saying you should lie. I'm saying you should stop waiting until you feel ready. Because the world won't give you power just because you're qualified. It gives power to those who claim it. So if you've been holding back, if you've been hesitating because you think you're not quite there yet, let me offer you this: confidence isn't the reward, it's the strategy. And when wielded with intention, it becomes the reason doors open before you ever touch the handle. Let me tell you something most people never realize. Until it's too late, the world doesn't treat you the way you are. It treats you the way you assume you should be treated. Think about that. Assumption, what you silently believe about yourself shapes everything. Not your talents, not your past, not even your intentions. It all begins with the quiet script running in your mind. If you assume you're weak, you'll move like you're weak. You'll speak softly, hesitate when challenged, avoid the spotlight. And the world, it'll nod along. It will treat you as forgettable, replaceable. Small, but if you assume you're strong, even before you've earned it, you walk taller. You hold eye contact longer. You speak like your words matter. And the people around you, they'll sense it, they'll mirror it. Because they're not responding to some deep investigation of your soul. They're just reacting to the signal you're sending. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how some people just command attention without saying a word? They walk into a room and suddenly the energy shifts. No titles, no credentials, no introduction. Just presence. What you're seeing is assumption in motion. That person believes deep down that they belong, that they matter, that their presence deserves space. And so the world agrees. There's a brutal little line I keep close. You do not become what is true. You become what you accept. Every gesture, every glance, every pause in your voice flows from the story you've accepted about yourself. The man who believes he's irrelevant will be treated like background noise. The one who believes he's a threat, even if he says nothing, people take notice. That's how powerful assumption is. It's not about arrogance. It's about alignment. About deciding internally who you are before anyone else gets a chance to define you. So here's the real question. What are you assuming about yourself today? Are you quietly telling the world to overlook you? Or are you walking like someone who knows the room was waiting for him to arrive? Here's something you won't hear in school. Your reputation has very little to do with who you are and everything to do with what you repeat. The world doesn't know your heart. It doesn't know your journey, your struggles, your potential, and truthfully, it doesn't care. What it does know is the image you keep showing it. Again and again and again. That's how legends are born. Not from honesty, but from consistency. Look closely at any powerful man in history. He didn't just show up and get recognized. He constructed himself, deliberately, relentlessly. He chose a version of himself that served his vision, and he stuck to it so faithfully that the world had no choice but to believe. That's the game most people never learn. They think being real means exposing every detail, every flaw, every insecurity. But power doesn't play by those rules. Power comes from editing. Think of it like this. A politician smiles not because he's happy, but because he knows it earns trust. A general stands tall not because he's fearless, but because he knows posture speaks louder than words. A king, he doesn't flinch. Because the moment he does, his image cracks and so does his influence. They're not lying. They're choosing what to show and what to withhold. That's not deception. That's design. So ask yourself, what version of you are people seeing? Is it scattered, reactive, hesitant, or is it intentional? Strategic? Clear? Every time you walk into a room, you're either reinforcing your myth or weakening it. And if you don't build that myth, someone else will build it for you to serve their story, not yours. So no, you don't need to fake anything, but you do need to decide what story you want to be remembered for and live it so consistently that no one dares to question who you are. There's a pattern I've seen again and again. Maybe you've seen it too. The man who waits. He's patient, hardworking, kind. He hopes that if he just does the right things long enough, someone will notice. Someone will reward him. Someone will say, "You're the one we've been waiting for." But here's the hard truth. Power doesn't wait. It doesn't reward effort. It rewards assertion. The men who rise aren't always the best. They're simply the ones who declare themselves first. Not with arrogance, but with certainty. They don't ask for the spotlight, they step into it. They don't wonder if they're worthy, they decide they are. Let that sink in. You don't need to be recognized as the best. You need to act like you already are, because the world doesn't hand out crowns, it hands out mirrors. It reflects back what you show it. That's why your body speaks before your mouth does. Your posture, your tone, the way you carry your energy, all of it sends signals. Signals that tell people how to treat you. If you enter a room like you belong, people will treat you like you do. If you carry yourself like you're valuable, others will begin to agree, not because they studied you, but because they felt your presence. This is where real influence begins, not with words, but with the silent transmission of self-belief. It's like writing a script. You choose the role. You rehearse it with your walk, your gaze, your stillness, and eventually others begin to repeat the lines you taught them. He's a leader. He's got something different. He's going places. But they're not describing you. They're reciting the story you planted in their minds. So here's the question. Are you waiting for someone to declare your value? Or are you ready to declare it yourself with every step, every breath, every moment? Because in this world, you don't earn power by waiting. You claim it by embodying it first. Let's end with the law that underlies everything we've talked about. Assumption is destiny. Not luck, not talent, not intelligence, but the quiet belief you carry about yourself. That's what determines the direction of your life. If deep down you believe you're not worthy, you'll walk smaller. You'll speak softly. You'll overthink every move and apologize for simply existing. And people will believe you, not because it's true, but because that's the message. You're broadcasting. The world mirrors what you assume, but flip the script. Assume you are powerful. Assume your ideas matter. Assume the room wants to hear from you. Then suddenly, your voice gains weight, your posture expands. Your presence becomes hard to ignore. You don't have to prove you belong. You behave as if you do, and the world adjusts. That's not delusion. That's design. It's the same principle behind every transformation, every rise to power, every story of someone who came from nothing. What really happened? They decided who they were long before anyone else believed it. Belief isn't something you wait for. It's something you put on like armor, not because you're perfect, but because the world does not respond to hesitation. It responds to certainty. We admire those who move like they already know the outcome. Even when they're scared, even when they're unsure. That's what makes them magnetic. That's what makes them unstoppable. So let me leave you with this. Are you assuming you're not enough? Not ready? Not chosen? Then that's the life you're unconsciously stepping into. But if you assume right now that you are already the man you've been waiting to become, you'll begin to walk, speak, and lead from a different place. And the world, slowly but surely, will treat you accordingly. Power isn't granted, it's assumed. And those who dare to assume it rule. Let me leave you with the most important truth of all. Power is not granted. It is assumed. The world isn't waiting to give you permission. It's not going to hand you recognition, applause, or a throne just because you tried hard or meant well. It only responds to one thing: how you carry yourself, how boldly you decide that you belong, that you matter, that you lead. So if you've been waiting to be chosen, waiting to feel ready, waiting for someone to finally say, you're the one, stop. Because here's the twist, no one's coming. And the moment you understand that, you're free. You don't act powerful after people see you that way. You act powerful before, so they have no choice but to see it. You walk, speak, and move like the man who already is what he claims to be. Not in arrogance, but in certainty. And that certainty changes everything because people follow belief. They submit to presence. They obey conviction. So I'll ask you one last question, one that truly matters. Who are you going to be? The moment this video ends, will you go back to waiting? Or will you choose to move like you already are the man you were meant to become? Because that choice, that tiny invisible shift in your posture, your tone, your intent, that's what separates those who are remembered from those who were always almost ready. Assume your power, wear it without apology, and go take what's already yours.